Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 536. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 1. I remembered the first time I read that novel. A really stuffy, boring hospital's ward. A single PC located in its lobby. When I stood in line to have a go at it, a gentleman wearing a fedora stepped aside for me. The computer screen at the time was showing the Webnovel platform that enjoyed visiting. I dazedly stared at the screen before inputting the keywords. I might have inserted 3 or so words, but couldn't quite remember what I typed back then. However, I still remembered what I was thinking of back then. The mechanical pencil leads strewn about on the classroom floor, the indigo-hued skies extending far beyond outside the windows. What I could tell for sure was that my hands, used to open the classroom window, had typed something, and that led me to discover that novel. 3 ways to survive in a ruined world. Through that story, I survived. He was definitely not at fault for this story being born. I felt sick inside. I couldn't fight against the dizziness and collapsed on the floor. The texts before my eyes were blurry and hard to see. Han Suyang was TLS 123. While panting heavily, I lay unmoving on the floor for a long time. Only the same exact question continued to swirl around in my head, the question of but, why? Why, for someone like me? I remained collapsed for a while. I thought I cried, too. However, no matter how I thrashed and screamed and sobbed, the already written sentences couldn't be changed. Han Suyang had to spend 13 years of life just for me, and helped me live by crafting sentences literally carved out of her. And then, she was extinguished. Kim Dok-ja. The fourth wall was calling out to me. I quietly listened to the next words. You show old read. I gingerly stood back up. My reflection on the windows was a complete mess. It'd be hard to call my body an adult anymore. My height had decreased a lot, and my face had gotten younger, too. The coat I wore no longer fit me. I stared at that face for a long time, before taking the coat off for good. How many years has it been? Ir ths ti me has no mayaning he ri. Understood what that meant. This subway was the location where the most ancient dream had his dreams. So, the time of other world lines couldn't measure the time flowing within this train. In all honesty, I had completely lost all sense of time after entering this train, anyway. Even then, there should still be this thing called perceived time, right? Around 21763 years. It's not as long as I thought. I'm still way younger than the secretive plotter, right? St ilalital rnt. I heard the fourth wall cackle away. If it wasn't for this guy's presence here, I'd have gone insane a long time ago. Along with the pasususu noise, the tip of my pinky decreased a little. Since when did this start from, I wondered. I didn't do anything, yet my body continued to grow smaller. Well, if I were to be more specific, it wasn't really I didn't do anything, though. Will I keep getting smaller? I stared at the crumbs of fables drifting away outside the windows and asked. Where are those fables going off to, anyway? To universe subconsciousness, and where is that? In a war elderly neyouar and conscious of. The role of the most ancient dream was to imagine all of the world lines. Even if I wasn't conscious of it, my subconsciousness was still continuously watching the world lines. Though se fables yllb reb oran as another Kim Dok-ja as another Kim Dok-ja? Mita for ically speaking its lika th at. I thought I could understand what the fourth wall was saying. Fables were streaming beyond the galaxies to head towards another world line. Those fables were, in essence, me. Just like the 49% version of me living along with my companions somewhere in the 1864th regression turn, my fragments could very well be reborn as Kim Dok-ja in a world line somewhere out there. If it's only that little, I think it'll be a bit of a push to call that guy Kim Dok-ja. I mean, he won't be the same as me with such a small fragment. You me GHT be re GHT. An existence that might have a different name and face to me. Even then, that existence would come to life and start imagining the universe. He'd be moved after reading the story, and then stare at the world line. And just like that, he'd maintain this universe. I see. Somehow, I thought I could understand the principle of this universe just a little. I pressed my crumbling fingers against the window. When I did, the rate of crumbling began accelerating. If you do th at. This is my way of atoning for this story. Not just from my fingers, but the fables began scattering away little by little from the shoulders as well as my legs, too. The scattered fables would fly around in the universe and become sentences that go on to support this universe from somewhere. To say that, though you have grown up while reading this story, there's no need for you to become it. That's what the author of The Ways of Survival, Han Soo-young, said. I had clearly heard her. Even then, I couldn't heed her words. How could I make any other choice when looking at such a story? When I closed my eyes, the overview of the entire universe would get drawn inside my head. Han Soo-young wrote the story. Yoo Young-hyuk lived that story. And I read that very story. And that's how this world barely managed to reach its completion. Dokja SSI. Because this tragedy existed, I got to meet certain people. Someone was able to get saved, too. Kim Dokja stared into the universe with no visible end. And now, I knew what my future was like. Every time I read something, I'd crumble away. My crumbling fables would scatter to countless world lines out there and become the gaze that maintained this universe. I would lose all of my memories, and lose everything that I hold dear. And in the end, only the desire to see the next story would remain in me. But, without that desire, this universe couldn't continue. This universe could only continue telling its story as long as someone was looking at it. Being stuck and unmoving in this universe meant death. Suchuchuchu. The countless me divided into particles continued to spread out to the numerous world lines out there. The rate of the fables scattering continued to hasten. If I forget about everything, I won't feel this pain anymore, right? Yountmembr Tural. To someone who even lost the traces of his loss, no such thing as loss existed. While picking up the smartphone rolling around on the floor, I spoke up. Will I have enough time to read it one more time, I wonder? I opened the file for The Ways of Survival, and scrolled up past the author's words that I had to read with great difficulty. 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World. I started reading this novel from the very beginning. I read Yoo Young-hyuk's third turn. Some stories I already knew, while some others felt brand new to me. The so-called final revised version was exactly the same as the original that I remembered. Kim Dokja didn't exist in it. Pasusususu. Just as my fable scattered away, the sentences from The Ways of Survival filled me up inside. When I got tired, I closed my eyes for a little bit and rested, and after resting, I continued reading the novel. 5th turn, 6th. 64th. 129th. 672nd. 914th. 1642 ND. The page continued to scroll down, and I was overjoyed or saddened several times. Not being able to comment did bum me out. I wanted to let Han Soo-young know of my emotions one more time. To tell her that I could only come this far because of the story you gave me, that I loved your story more than anyone in this world. And so, I read, and then, read some more. How long did I read this very story? Suchuchuchu. By the time I reached the epilogue, my vision suddenly grew fuzzy. I even wondered if I became blind after reading a novel for far too long. A new update has been completed. But then, my vision was slowly restored. What I saw were proper sentences, however. Sentences and paragraphs had become individual fragments. Words that were no longer in the form of a completed novel. Even then, I could still read them somehow. A world had been destroyed, and a brand new one was being born. My heart was beating loudly. A story I was intimately familiar with was there. I was the sole reader who knew the conclusion of this world. Within this story, I existed. And I'm Yu Young Hyuk. It seems that I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Han Soo-young. I'm the assistant to Cha Sang-jaeon Nim in the group. And they were there, too. What if the scenarios didn't start? What would have happened to us? Dokja SSI, your sponsor isn't something like the one-eyed fortune teller, right? Dokja SSI, have you thrown a hand grenade before? Juicy, do you have any particular food you like? We broke past the scenarios, together. Hyung, are you maybe a god? Load the cannons. Everyone, fight to your heart's content. I won't let anyone die. You stinking bastards. Again, you didn't even come to fetch me. The one I like isn't you, but the demon king of salvation. Bot. And I lived my life together with them. The next scenario is: we experienced trials and had to face off against life-threatening situations many times. We met constellations. We broke past seemingly impossible scenarios several times. And eventually reached the end of the hellish scenarios. Yours eternity. The companions returned to their everyday lives. Some people were rebuilding the destroyed PC banks. They were putting up the torn posters of the computer games once more. In the world where the apocalypse had been overcome, people would search for other forms of entertainment once more. Yu Young Hyuk observed this spectacle, and quietly clenched his right hand that hadn't held a mouse in a long while. Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gil-young were enrolled into a temporary school. Not an elementary, not a secondary, nor was it a high school, no, it was, as the word implied, a temporary school. Shin Yu-sung was surprised to learn that such a place could exist in this world. Lee Ji-hai stared at the sight of the destroyed Taepung Girls' High for a long time. Then started walking on the school's athletics field. She used to run on this very field with her friends once upon a time. She quietly stared at the worn-out track lines, before cautiously assuming the starting posture. While reading the continuing stories of my companions, I wiped my eyes several times. This was the ending to this story. The companions were definitely living their lives in that place. They ate, they slept, they met with each other and talked. And I was there, too. The 49% version of me. Kim Dokja that had the memories of the companions, but didn't know anything about the ways of survival. And Kim Dokja read those sentences. But then... You, just who the hell are you? What was going on here? Speak. Who the hell are you? It wasn't supposed to be like this. I'm sure of it. Kim Dokja is still in that place. But, how? If you get a chance to run again, do you believe you can see it better the next time? Why? Su-chu-chu-chu-chu. The story was continuing on. The story that should have ended didn't end. More correctly, they chose to not end it. Stigma, group regression LV.1 is activating. I read that sentence half in despair. This shouldn't have happened. This sentence, it should never have been written. But the sentence uncaringly led to the next one. Remember this. We have only one opportunity. The companions, they were fighting again. The hellish scenarios were a place they shouldn't have gone back to, no matter what their reasons were. Even then, my companions returned to that place. Hey, shorty. You aren't going to flip a coin this time? It'll be the same whether I do or not, you know. What do you mean? Even if I flip it 100 times and it comes out only once, even if only 1% of Hyung remains in that place, I'll still go there to rescue him. Because, that 1% is still Hyung. Then, the scenario commenced. And in the midst of the banquet of coins exploding in the air, the Kibis of Starstream were clearly freaking out. Within the explosive level of interest shown by the constellations, the companions were shouting out loudly. Hey, Abaddon! Choose me. I'm gonna absolutely become hundreds of times stronger than that sooty bastard in the future. General Nim. Are you there? I know you're looking at me right now. I don't need any sponsors, so please just give me coins, instead. Black Flame Dragon, stop pestering me with messages while I'm still being civil, okay? I told you I won't choose you this time around. They had to be insane. Fufufu, you sure took your sweet time getting to Chunmuro. You think you can rescue that Bicilii like this? As an aside, this whole area is now this great one's Torito, superscript 1. Will you just shut up and hand over the flag, Gong Pildu? These people who lost their minds were clearing the scenario with insane methods. Dangerous moments came in their direction many times, but the companions never yielded once. Incarnation, e.g. High, is activating stigma, transmission LV.1. You stinking sooty bastard. This is why only you got stronger, by using crap like this. The transmission. The regressor-specific skill that allowed one to strongly ruminate over the memories from the previous life and let one regain their past skills. Uriel. Great Sage. Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. And with the aid from the constellations added in, the companions got to clear the scenario at a considerable pace. It truly was an amazing marching speed. We can clear this with avatars. No one has to die. However, it wasn't as if they emerged as unopposed victors every single time. Conquering King. My apologies, but you need to die here. Some of the people they regressed with turned out to be traitors. Had you regained your original strength, all three of us combined wouldn't even be a match to you, but as it is now? It's a different story. I bit down on my lip. These people joined the regression journey while harboring impure motivation from the very beginning. And to make matters worse, they aimed for the early part of the scenarios, when Yu Young-hyuk was with Yumiya. They probably thought that he'd be at his weakest around this point in time. However, that was a miscalculation. Wah. Miaya. Almost at the same time Yu Young-hyuk spoke up, a lengthy sword emerged from Yumiya's mouth. The Dark Heavenly Demon Sword. The highest grade item that could only be acquired around the middle stages of the scenarios, was now firmly gripped in Yu Young-hyuk's hand. Chills ran down my skin. I had no idea that Yumiya's inventory could be used in that fashion. While emitting truly incredible killing intent, Yu Young-hyuk coldly declared, "Die." Sentences continued on sporadically after that. The Demon King of Salvation during this turn is me. What the hell, we agreed that I'll be the one. That modifier is mine, Nuna. The companions didn't concede an inch to anyone, and majority of the constellations are bearing their animosity towards Kim Dokja Company's incarnations. And they didn't compromise once with anyone, either. The Kim Dokja Company continued to clear the scenarios in a pace not too slow, but not too fast either. Certain scenes were dealt with using simple descriptions, while some others were completely omitted. The later they got in the scenarios, the worse the segmentation of each scenes became. It was as if the rough sketches of ideas had been left behind there, instead. Companions who were at the 20th scenario were suddenly in the 15th, then they could be found in the 35th next. However, there was no doubt that the companions were there. And I could imagine them. They ran on the blank margins. They were running on the scenario's field of snow. And they were advancing forward one sentence at a time. They were gradually getting closer to me. While looking at them, I repeated the cycle of crying and sleeping. The fuzzier my consciousness became, the stronger my desire grew. Even though I knew that I shouldn't think this way, I couldn't stop myself. I want to read this story for a little bit longer. Just like that, I read the disconnected sentences, and then, read the one after that. And I imagined what might be between those sentences, as if I was groping around in the dark. The viewpoint that the author couldn't control, and one that no reader could predict. And within this space between the lines not addressed by any sentences, the companions continued to complete the scenarios little by little. Inside this space between the lines where no one could intrude upon their lives, they remained as gods of this story. While reading their story, I blacked out several times. My reading speed got worse and worse, and my fable was disappearing bit by bit, as well. Meanwhile, the sentences of my companions continued to diligently pile up. to the 98th scenario, and then, to the 99th once more. Sentences written by their own lives were accurately being compiled one by one. And eventually, they have finally reached the conclusion she had written. The very last sentence arrived at my doorstep. That was the end of The Ways of Survival, a story seemingly abandoned in the middle of being written. A story that didn't get completed because of that reason. From beyond the very last sentence of the story, a certain noise came to me. A noise that sounded like someone calling out to someone else. Or perhaps, the noise of someone knocking on the door. The smartphone went off with a tab, noise, and its pitch-black screen reflected my face, now that of a child. I was crying. Kim Dokja slowly raised his head. I felt the faint vibration of the subway. Since when did it start? Thud dash. Someone was pounding on the rear door of the train's cabin. Chapter 537. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 2. Run. We only have to go a little bit further. Han Suyang, along with her companions, broke through the waves of the constellations. The ark scattered debris as it was destroyed, and revealed the final wall, in its full glory in the distance. The grace of a great fable was enveloping the companions as if to protect them. Great fable, one who rebels against fate, has begun its storytelling. It was a new great fable they got to earn during this regression turn. Without it, they would have died many times over. They could see the figures of constellations marching towards them from the distance. Like enraged wild beasts, myth-grade constellations from Vedas and Papyrus were rushing in their direction. Unlike their previous regression turn, they didn't have outer gods supporting them this time. Their combat force was in an overwhelmingly disadvantageous situation. The only reason why they weren't pushed back even then, was because the strongest ever group in existence made out of regressors was lending them support. The ones taking on the front lines were the Chinese and Indian incarnations. When China's Fei Hu gave his signal, incarnations from his own force, AQ, yanked out their weapons simultaneously. As if he couldn't possibly lose here, India's Rundir Khan also joined the fray. The incarnations from Tremorti, following after him, pulled out their own spears too, and caused the sandstorm to violently rage on. Then, Justice, led by Selena Kim, and Solzhenitsyn, led by Iris, who tagged along with her, took on both sides of the flanks. Even then, their battle situation remained disadvantageous. Go on ahead, I shall take care of this place. If you fail to rescue my disciple, then consider your lives forfeit. Kyrios and the Breaking the Sky Saint, they too were part of the 100-strong regressors. Weapons of these two swept across the battlefield, and the Transcenders from Murim supported their rear and followed after the duo. Kwaya. Both Kyrios and the Breaking the Sky Saint had grown even stronger than before through the regression, as if they were in competition against each other. Their sword strikes raucously shook the entire battlefield. The screams of the constellations being torn apart by the silver-hued storm reverberated throughout the land. The wall needed to be opened while they were buying a little bit of time. This wall had been opened once before. Han Suyang looked up at the massive wall they had finally succeeded in reaching and spoke up. Zhang Haiyang. Yes, ma'am. As if she was waiting for it, Zhang Haiyang extended her hand. She was now the full-fledged king of Transcenders after going through the scenarios one more time. The wall of impossible communication has discovered its intended position. The final wall began vibrating as if it was reacting to their great fable. Yu Sang-ah. Yu Sang-ah nodded her head and stepped forward. The wall that decides samsara has discovered its intended position. You are. I see. You have journeyed this lengthy cycle of time and eventually made your way back here, my Arhat. The fable of Sakyamuni quietly entered their ears. Sakyamuni of this world line easily accepted Yu Sang-ah's existence. He had already repeated many, many cycles of samsara, allowing him to gain an understanding of this universe's rules. Zhang Huiwen, Yi Gilyang. The wall that divides the good and evil, they received from Metatron and Agars. Zhang Huiwen reached out first and placed her hand on the final wall. Have you really come here, after witnessing what's beyond that wall? Metatron of this world line was deeply astonished by the companion's existence. He accepted the eventual destruction of Eden, and admitted that that result couldn't be changed. However, he made a slightly different decision during this regression turn. The proof of that was the Eden's archangels currently aiding the incarnations. However, it wasn't only him who made a bizarre choice. How amusing. You dare to ask me, a demon king, to hand over the wall to you. The demon kings and the angels who fought against each other with murderous intensity back in the Great War of Saints and Demons stood as their allies this time. It was a choice based on their desire to survive, but nevertheless, it proved to be a great help to Kim Dokja Company. The wall that divides the good and evil has discovered its intended position. A great number of constellations are unleashing their status towards Kim Dokja Company. Of course, it wasn't as if every constellation out there became their allies. The absolute majority of star streams still remained as their enemies, and those constellations who chose to help were minuscule in number. Even then, the companions got this far safely. Although deep scars remained in various parts of their bodies, not a single one was lost along the way. This was only because no one got greedy and the end goal was the same for everyone. Han Suyang looked at Lee Hyun-sung the last. The burly man's back was carrying the pale-faced Kim Dokja. More specifically, not Kim Dokja but an avatar he left behind. She looked at him and spoke. Help us, Kim Dokja. However, this man was also definitely Kim Dokja. Just like how the 1863rd turns Han Suyang was definitely Han Suyang. The other me might not want this to happen. This story, it has ended back then. Kim Dokja stammered. He had come to accept that he was Kim Dokja's avatar by now. Han Suyang quietly stared at him, before saying this. Why don't we ask that after meeting the other you? That brought a sad little smile on Kim Dokja's lips. He looked at Han Suyang, then looked at the faces of the companions one by one. If this is the story you wanted. His pale hand then touched the final wall. The last fragment of the final wall was the fourth wall. And as he was Kim Dokja's avatar, he too held a part of that key. Su-chu-chu-chu-chu. As if this world wasn't acknowledging his existence, Kim Dokja's body began shaking unsteadily. And soon after that, a portion of the wall opened up along with loud splitting noises. Kim Dokja shaking around as if he was getting electrocuted, blacked out instantly. Lee Hyun-sung continued to carry him on the back. Yu Young-hyuk, dusting the blade of his dark heavenly demon sword, spoke up. Forward, at top speed. Along with his signal, the companions began running forward. Everyone, stay strong. Only a little bit more to go. We still have enough life and death pills left, so even if you're only slightly injured, please tell me right away. The voices of the companions were encouraging each other. Han Suyang ran while listening to them. A bright white field of snow stretched before her eyes. Letters piling up like snow could be seen here and there on this field. She stepped on those letters and leapt up. Did the 1863rd turns her write this story in the revised version? Did she think about Kim Dokja's story and the epilogue to come after? She couldn't tell. No matter what she tried, she simply couldn't remember that portion. It was then, something fell and settled on her eyelashes. She reflexively wiped it away, only for snowflake-like things to stain her hand. This girl, you told me that you were a penniless book lover, didn't you? The white snowflakes of letters were scattering in the air. Sentences that definitely existed there, but couldn't be seen because how pure white their color was. Han Suyang. Han Suyang dazedly stared at that sentence falling into her hand. Your story, it. This was Kim Dokja's sentence. Not just anyone, but Kim Dokja himself had written this earnest impression. She gripped the sentence tightly. Just like the starlight being pushed away by the breaking of dawn, the sentences crumbled away within her hand. Don't worry. I will read it. Even if it's over 3,000 chapters. These sentences, they were something she so desperately wanted to have. Unfortunately, they weren't hers. Memories were rushing in. Emotions that her other self had experienced. Han Suyong could vividly feel them even now. The resentment that didn't know which way to go was spreading within her mind. Beyond this field of snow was where Kim Dokja could be found. Kim Dokja, who made Kim Dokja who he was. Kim Dokja, who remembered the ways of survival. Kim Dokja, who chose the memories of the book he had written over the memories of happier days. God damn it. God damn it. The novel that was written by her, who was also not her. That very novel saved Kim Dokja, and also at the same time, it doomed him. And she now needed to take responsibility for the conclusion to the tragedy her other self had created. It was around then that a faint flicker of light revealed itself from afar. Kugugugugu. She saw something busy rushing forward beyond this vast field of snow. The companions looked at each other all at once. Not a single person here didn't know what that thing was. It was the subway. Chimera Dragon. The Chimera Dragon loudly held out as it got summoned, and took flight after the companions got on its back. The creature scythed through the air and reached the rear of the subway in an instant. Only a little bit remained now. As long as they could bridge this gap, they... Yaha! Suddenly, the Chimera Dragon screamed and lost its balance. The stunned Shinyu Sung quickly took a look behind only to discover some things were biting onto the dragon's tail. Grrrr. Large wild dogs resembling pitch-black shadows began biting into the dragon's tail and its wings. These creatures were appearing from a portal opening up in the air. The Chimera Dragon's torn-off flesh got scattered away within the white snowfield. Hounds chasing after the abyss? They had seen these creatures before. These hounds from another dimension attacked the secretive plotter and the characters from the 999th turn. They were terrifying monsters that supposedly hunted down the wanderers of the world lines that violated the probability. But, why were these hounds attacking them now? Yu Yonghyuk gasped and spoke. It seems that they judged the group regression to be a danger to the world line. God damn it. The number of the hounds rushing outside the portal increased exponentially. They even saw hounds with massive physiques, too. This level of attacking force was truly unprecedented. And accompanied by the loud howl that reverberated throughout the snowfield, the hounds kicked the air and pounced on them simultaneously. The moment the black clouds of hounds landed on the companions, the heavens seemed to shatter along with the loud rumble. The golden-colored lightning crashed down and hounds were viciously cast away. Yu Seng'a was the first to figure out who was behind the attack. Great Sage. The golden rims were glowing gloriously. The master of the Ruijin Gubang was grinning confidently. Leave this to me. Constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, is unleashing his status. It wasn't just the great sage alone. Some had followed the companions into the passageway of the final wall, left wide open. This is my opportunity to show everyone what will happen if this great one uses both of his hands. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, has removed all the seals on himself. The noble flames of an archangel were added to the mix and burned away at the hounds. I may not be as strong as the 999th turns me, but there's no problem buying you more time. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is rousing up the flames of hell. The flames of hellfire brilliantly danced upwards as pure white wings spread out. With a faint smile, Oriel spoke. I'll leave Kim Dokja in your hands, Huiwana. Using that fleeting opening the constellations had created, the Chimera Dragon finally managed to bite onto the rear of the subway. However, the vehicle's hardy exterior didn't break even when the dragon's fangs clamped down on it. Master. With me. E.G. Hai, holding swords in both of her hands, kicked off the dragon's back and leapt up. Two swords were held in her grip, the twin dragon sword of the maritime war god, and the invincible warrior's sword from the Goryo's #1 swordsman. Constellation, Goryo's first swordsman, is bestowing his blessing. Constellation, maritime war god, is cheering on his incarnation. The fourth law. Fourth sword that beheads the emptiness. It was the skill Chiak Junjiang used while fighting against the indescribable distance. Although still incomplete, Iji could use this sword strike to some degree now. This miracle only came about due to the hellish training she went through in the Isle of Reincarnators as well as her stunning innate talent. Qua 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 qua. The subway's exterior that withstood a dragon's fangs began to bend bit by bit from her continuous sword strikes. Not missing that opening, Yu Hyok's dark heavenly demon sword also made a move. The breaking the sky swordsmanship. Secret technique, inner mystery transmission. Shooting star slash. The trajectory of destruction the dark heavenly demon sword drew slammed into the rear of the subway. Once the choking dust cleared out of their view, a small hole had appeared on the train's rear. It's done. Everyone, get in. The companions rapidly infiltrated the subway's interior. More correctly, with the exception of 2 people. Yu Hyok. Behind you. Grrrr. The hounds that the constellations failed to block were flooding in from behind them. Yu Hyok unleashed all of his strength as a transcender to face them head-on. He shouted out while smacking the hounds away with the storm-like barrage of sword strikes. Go on ahead. I shall catch up to you soon. Han Suyang bit her lip. It wasn't just anyone but Yu Hyok, the strongest among their group. As he was a man who could fight evenly against a myth-grade constellation, he wouldn't get done in by the hounds of the abyss that easily. Don't get killed, okay? Han Suyang left those words behind and hurriedly entered the subway's interior. It was as exactly the same as the interior of the third-line train they all remembered. It was none other than that very same train, where they left Kim Dokja behind. Han Suyang quickly checked for the train cabin's information. Along with the tsu-chechit noise, the cabin's number floated up. She reflexively shouted out. Kim Dokja is in the cabin number 3807. Everyone, get to the front. This was a similar situation to back when they earned the great fable, Demon World Spring. It seemed that the rest of the companions also realized this. This does resemble that time when we fought against Surya. I shall pry open the door in front of us. Lee Hyun-sung quickly rushed forward, and while expanding every muscle on his body, he let out a mighty shout. Ha-wop! The great mountain push that had exceeded the skill proficiency was activated, and the thick subway's door creaked loudly while being pushed open. Great fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Stage transformation has been triggered. This great fable could only be completed because everyone worked together. And the blessing of this fable was now aiding them. When Lee Hyun-sung couldn't open a door, Yu Sang-ah found the button to operate it, and when a door even she couldn't do anything about appeared, Lee Gil-young summoned his insects and wore out the internal parts to make way. And so, they continued to open one, open two, and then, opened yet another door. As the number of doors they managed to open grew higher, the expressions of the companions were gradually getting heated up, too. Kim Dokja was definitely beyond their dot. Everyone in the group could feel it. The pitch-black door before them, it had to be the final door. Ugh. It's impossible with my stigma. Unfortunately, this door didn't want to open unlike before. I can't find the button either. Even the bugs say they can't figure out its structure. Should I use my skill to break it? They resorted to Iji-Hai's sword strikes as well as Lee Hyun-sung's great mountain destruction, but the door didn't budge an inch. The companions could only look at each other. How come only this door refused to open up? It was then that Yu Sang-ah opened her mouth. Everyone, wait. I think this door is the same as the one Yu Hyok SSI broke back in the past. Yu Hyok did that? Yes. Back in the third regression turn, Yu Hyok SSI broke this door and entered. Han Suyang reflexively looked behind her. But Yu Hyok didn't come with them. He was probably still fighting against the hounds chasing after the abyss even now at the rear of the train. It was right then that Shin Yu-sung cried out. Hounds are here. Even before they had realized it, the hounds were already trying to sneak in through the gaps they had destroyed. Han Suyang's mind began racing. What happened to Yu Hyok? Could it be that he got? Block the rear. Yoni. Hurry up. There was no more time to think. Yi Hyun-sung ran forward like a true tanker, and started enduring against the hound's fangs by entering steel transformation, while Yi Ji-hai and Zhang Hui-wan unsheathed their swords to smack away the creatures. Jang Hyang shouted out. Han Soo-young! Do something! Han Soo-young approached the black door. When she placed her hand on it, faint sparks began exploding. She slowly closed her eyes. All of the sentences were, in actual reality, written by her hands. Even if that was the other Han Soo-young, that version was still undoubtedly Han Soo-young. So, this hand should be able to open this door, too. Suchuchuchuchuku dash. As if she was now rewriting the sentences, Han Soo-young started messing with the wall's fable. I'm Yu Young-hyuk. The regressor Yu Young-hyuk was her creation. That was why she should be able to open this door, as well. Unfortunately, Han Soo-young didn't know. Su-chut-chut-chut. A story that had already left the author's hands was no longer under its creator's control. The universe of the ways of survival flooded into Han Soo-young's head. The things she did right, and those she didn't. Stories that she imagined and those she couldn't even have, crashed and churned in opposite directions inside her mind all at the same time. Cook. Blood trickled out from her eyes and mouth. The blood flow reversed, causing her blood to pour out onto the subway's floor. As her vision was dyed in crimson, Han Soo-young turned to look back at her companions. They were gradually spreading apart while fighting. And their running footsteps imprinted on the subway's corridor remained there like fables. You don't have the override authority. An already completed world was right before her eyes. The voices of her companions calling out to her seemed so distant. The world where the result devours the cause, and the cause devours the result. The world where all possibilities exist, and the individual possibility supports and maintains each other. A perfect, immortal epic where a story manufactures a story all on its own. She looked back, and the space before her began distorting along with a shower of sparks. The subway's four-sided door slowly started spinning and drew a circle. The door, now spinning viciously, became a pitch-black circle. A perfect, complete circle that didn't permit any and all types of external intrusions. She tottered and reached out to this circle, but Han Soo-young couldn't even touch it. This circle now resembled a single full stop. A full stop announcing that the story was truly complete, just like this. TLS 123. And this full stop was now addressing her. Youcannot cha ngeth is sto re. Chapter 538. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 3. The sentence floated up to the air. When she heard the voice that utterly ignored spelling rules or word spacing, Han Soo-young grew deeply flustered. Why you are? She did hear some things about this voice from Kim Dokja in the past. Right, that guy can also speak. A skill can talk? Well, I admit it kinda talks in a funny way, but you can still more or less understand it. She had no idea that one day she'd get to hear that voice herself. The fourth wall? When called out, the spinning circle began to cackle. You lot cannot pa ss here the great one do esent wa it. The Great One? She had heard of that title somewhere before. Su-cha-cha-cha-cha-chit. The probabilities sparks wildly exploded and the companions all screamed out. The vicious storm of aftermath even managed to blow away the hounds chasing after the abyss outside the subway. The final wall is not permitting your group's entry. Your group does not have the qualifications to meet the most ancient dream. The pain akin to their bodies being shredded apart into tiny bits slammed into them. This was no doubt a ploy to push the companions outside the subway. T is THE-FI-NAL stop. One of Han Soo-young's knees was bent in an abnormal direction. However, she didn't even scream once and simply glared at the pitch-black circle right before her eyes. I'll decide when and where I get off. The 1865th turns Han Soo-young didn't select the abyssal black flame dragon. An unbelievable level of forceful aura flooded out from her entire figure. Han Suyang became a constellation on her own. Constellation, architect of the false last act, is revealing her status. It was the same modifier that the 1863rd turns Han Suyang had acquired. She unleashed every bit of fable she had been saving up until now. Brilliantly pure blue rays of light swirled violently from one of her irises. Exclusive skill, Eye of Truth, has been activated. Back during the 1863rd turn, this skill failed to penetrate past that wall. However, Han Suyang of this regression turn was a different being altogether. Fable, Revision Specialist, has begun its storytelling. In this turn, she had been diligently acquiring a lot more fables related to writing than before. Suchuchuchuchu. Just like how the foundations of other characters were a collection of sentences, it should be the same story for the fourth wall, as well. As long as this world was a novel, this wall must have been made up of words and sentences. Even if she failed to decipher its foundation, there should still be sentences left behind somewhere that helped her make a guess. The fourth wall catoned on to what Han Suyang was planning to do and ballooned up its overall thickness. USE. The fourth wall is increasing its thickness even more. The spinning black circle grew even more robust. The fourth wall. The mind defense skill that couldn't be penetrated by the existences found within the ways of survival. Han Suyang didn't try to forcibly penetrate the wall. Instead, she quietly stared at it. Fable, Guide of the Line Spacing, has begun its storytelling. Some things would grow even more obvious the more you try to hide them. Han Suyang scanned the outer appearance of the wall. There were plenty of scratches and cracks visible on it. Its past history of not sparing itself when trying to protect Kim Dokja was left behind as fully visible traces all over the wall. That great one must be protected. Why did this wall hide that sentence in the most secretive place of all? That is the last favor the god asked of me. In that very moment, Han Suyang's lips began trembling. As pulsing migraine assaulted her, sentences above the wall flashed past her brain. Hey. Yes? If, by chance, something happens to me, then you. Please don't say things like that. If you really see me as your god, then. A middle-aged man wearing a fedora was looking up at her with a committed, loyal look on his face. Protect that guy, no matter what. The existence that knew the ways of survival just as well as the original author, herself. The existence that remained even more indifferent to the tragedies of this world than her, and the existence that lived for the sole purpose of completing the story. The existence that opened the scenario in this world, and the one who connected the two world lines as one. The fourth wall spoke up instead of Han Suyang's trembling lips. Dion TB so supri said Evan IREA lease edit GUST now, what did you say? I also didn't KNL who IW as. There were some existences without a fleshed out past that had to simply exist until belatedly, they were permitted to acquire their histories. Beings that didn't exist until the author decided to give them a backstory. IBCA me com PLETEB ka SE of YOU. The scenes from the moments when the paid service got underway brushed past her mind. The moment when the two world lines of reality and fiction became one, and the 1863rd turns Dakibi King standing right in the middle. WHYI Hadi to Bekome WALL David ING the WRLD. The Dakibi King became the wall that divided the world. WHYI Hadi to protect T Kim Dokja. And then, it carried out the last favor its god had asked of it. YOUDDNRE. The existence that repeated one single story for a long, long time, and the one who became addicted to that story, constantly lusting after it. The existence that had read the ways of survival even before Kim Dokja did, was right before her eyes. This world's most ancient reader. I2DDNRE. The Dakibi King filled the void left behind by Han Suyang and became this world's chronicler. THISST Ori is NOW mine. And eventually, it succeeded in completing the story. It was I who asked you in the first place. So, stop this right now. The existence that continued to uphold an order for a very long time had eventually become the order itself. Why, oh, you are not my godnemo. She who had lost her position as the original author was no longer the creator, as well. Han Suyang stared at her own fingertips. The Ways of Survival, her other self had written, went on to become a novel spanning 3,149 chapters. That novel left her hands and reached its reader. You're right, this world's god is no longer me, but the reader. That would be Kim Dokja beyond this spinning circle, slumbering and dreaming away in eternity. So, let's ask that god, then. Let's ask if he really wishes to remain in this place, or... Han Suyang swallowed a life and death pill and righted her broken knee. And then, she walked forward step by step before extending her hands. Or, if he wants to get out of here with us. Blinding sparks of flames exploded on the tips of her hands. As if to reject her approach, the spinning circle's speed grew faster and faster. Blood splattered from both of her hands. Not even fables could protect her. However, even while suffering from the cruel pain akin to her hands being grounded into fine dust, Han Suyang didn't stop. Kim Dokja. Say something. There were some people who, despite wishing to be saved, couldn't bring themselves to ask others to save them. Han Suyang always wanted to write certain sentences for people like that. To write sentences for those people who couldn't say or write anything. Just like how it always had been for her, all she could do was to write sentences. But, as long as she could cross over to the other side of this circle, as long as she could get rid of this full stop, then... The idiot that unquestioningly took the lemon candy offered as a joke and sucked on it. Kim Dokja. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. She couldn't reach the other side of the wall with only the sentences she possessed. It was then, yet another hand was laid on top of Han Suyang's. It was Yu Sang-a. Mandalas were unfurled on both sides of her as she began loading her fable. While wiping away the blood trickling down her nose, she smiled weakly. Dokja SSI. The man who hid in the cabinet alone to read the Ways of Survival. Yu Sang-a's sentences were now calling out to Kim Dokja. As if they were grabbing at a doorknob, their hands reached out and grabbed the spinning circle. However, the circle's speed didn't decrease in the slightest. They were still short on the sentences. But then, hands from two more people were laid on top of the two women's. I shall hold on to the inside. I'm on the left. Zhang Huiwan and Yi Hyansong, letting out a loud, spirited yell, began clinging onto the circle as well. The man who silently listened to the boring stories from the military. Yi Hyansong yelling out unleashed his fable, and Zhang Huiwan next to him matched his timing. Stinking stubborn mall of a damn troublemaker. Dokja SSI. Answer us. You can hear us, right? And now, Yi Seolwa and Gong Pildu added their hands next. The man who searched for medicinal herbs throughout the night for the sake of his companions. The bastard who stole all of my lands. A juicy. Hyung. The two kids also rushed in. The small hands of Shin Yusung and Yi Gilyong were placed on Han Suyang's one at a time. The man who always lied to reassure someone else. However, the man who wasn't very good at lying. Right behind them was Yi Jihai wielding her sword. She used her fists to slam into the circle. She hit it, then hit it again and again. I can't say something that cringy, anyway. So, just come out already. Squid a juicy. Different memories of everyone from different time and place, all those sentences of every single moment gathered together and wished for one Kim Dokja. However, the full stop still didn't want to budge even after the companions called out. No, only their hands ended up as a bloody mess. Their fables were being extinguished now. And then, a sentence floated up above the full stop. Maybe it's just our greed, wanting to save him? Shut up. Maybe, he's not in existence needing to be saved? The companions also knew it, knew that this action of theirs could be a meaningless one. That was why they wanted to know. To ask. To reach out, and confirm. Kim Dokja. I know you're in there, Jang Hyang shouted out. We talked about this, didn't we? Even if we can't reach each other, even if we can't meet, we gotta keep pounding on the wall until the end, right? Even if the wall would never open up, we agreed to keep writing something on it, didn't we? Even if we can't reach each other, even if we can't meet each other, we should continue to pound away on each other's walls. Even if that wall would never open up, keep writing something on that wall, anyway. When we do that, then maybe, someone might end up seeing our words someday. Then maybe, just maybe, you might finally want to come out of that place. Please. Say something. Anything. Please dash. And so, Jang Hyang's palm slammed into the full stop. And in the very next moment, wall of impossible communication is revealing its power. The full stop began to shake little by little. For the first time ever, the fourth wall, S aura changed. You Yu sang that didn't miss this opening and shouted out. Dokja SSI. We promised to meet during the next life, didn't we? Wall that decides samsara is revealing its capability. Lee Gilyong also shouted out as if he didn't want to lose. Hyung, you always think you are at fault for everything. Jang Hui-won carried on where the boy's words ended. I don't care whether you're good or evil, Dokja SSI. I don't plan on judging you according to the standards of this world. That's why. Wall that divides good and evil is revealing its theme. So, please open this door. Right next moment, a powerful rebound coming out from the door blew away the companions. The cacophony of loud exploding noises utterly deafened them. Once the ringing in their ears went away, only the cold silence remained in the surroundings. The injured companions got up one by one. Before Lee Hyun-sung could say something, though, Han Soo-young hurriedly placed a finger on her lips. Just like the way faint, soft drizzle moistened the parched ground, a quiet little noise could be heard. Knock. That noise, it was coming from beyond the full stop. A place beyond the completion of the story. Han Soo-young was the first to hear that sound. Knock, knock. The sound so small and so weak, yet still undoubtedly letting others know of his presence there. There he was. Shin Yu-sung broke down in tears. Someone was knocking on the door from beyond it. Han Soo-young rushed forward, followed right after by Yu Sang-ah. Lee Hyun-sung and Jang Hui-won laid their hands on top of the two women's, again. Lee Seol-hwa quickly healed the companions' wounded hands, while Gong Pil-do threw his own weight behind them. To fight against the rebound, Lee Ji-hai stabbed her sword on the floor, while Jang Hyang supported Han Soo-young's body. Fables from Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gilyong then began protecting Han Soo-young's hands. Focus all of your powers in one spot. Along with the loud quagagagak noise, their hands were grounded to bloody dust again. The full stop spinning speed was slowing down. Bit by agonizing bit, the worn-down surface of the full stop began developing cracks. Their fable was not enough. The full stop's size was gradually shrinking down. It continued to get smaller, as if to never permit their entry in this place. It was then, some people suddenly intruded into the subway. Constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, is incarnating. They were two members of Kim Dokja Company who had not revealed themselves up until now. My apologies for showing up late. One of them was the Queen of the Underworld, Persephone. And the other was Dokjaya. Rather than looking at the full stop, Lee Soo-jayong was now looking at the other Kim Dokja plopped down on the floor. He looked back at her in a daze, but then, bit down hard on his lip and grabbed onto her hand. Fables then began flooding out from both Lee Soo-jayong and Persephone. Two Kim Dokjas existed for them. Kim Dokja before the start of the scenario, and Kim Dokja after the scenario got underway. Two beings that had observed Kim Dokja longer than anyone else supported his avatar and approached the full stop. Han Soo-young nodded her head. The one who imprisoned Kim Dokja inside the wall was himself. Kim Dokja. Han Soo-young realized something as she witnessed his eyelashes tremble weakly. No matter how deeply her novel had influenced Kim Dokja, he was not the ways of survival. No matter how well she understood the ways of survival, it didn't automatically mean she understood Kim Dokja. She might be able to write sentences for someone else, but she certainly couldn't read those words in their stead. No, the role of reading was left up to the god of the new world, the reader. Help us. Kim Dokja's hand touched the full stop. Suchuchuchuchu. The fourth wall is increasing its thickness even more. Hands were laid on top of hands. The fourth wall was shouting out at them. You lotmu stfailhr. T hi ssto re h is being com ple ted th is way lready. Was it forbidden to change a complete story? Was it forbidden for a single universe to even dare think about being saved just because the rest of the universes were completed in unhappiness? Han Suyang wrapped Kim Dokja's hand laid on top of hers tightly and began crying. The memories from the 1863rd turn were going on a rampage. This story will cycle itself. Yet another Han Suyang would repeat the 1863rd turn inside this cycle. Kim Dokja and Han Suyang wouldn't recognize each other and start fighting again. Yu Young-hyuk would continue with his regressions. And to save them all, Kim Dokja would become the most ancient dream many, many times. The vast, indescribable time would cycle over and over again, leading them to reach and meet one another, only to part ways again. Enduring the innumerable lengths of time to meet, then meet again, and create stories. And with that, this story might become truly complete. However, if that was the case, just when would they ever be able to taste happiness? It's fine if the story is imperfect. Han Suyang's hands powerfully gripped onto the circle's crack. The surface of the gripped wall began tearing apart. If that story can make someone happy, then... The companions' fables crumbled as an incredible storm exploded. Kim Dokja's coat was ripped apart, and their weapons shattered to bits and pieces. The blindingly pure rays of light blanketed their view. Within this incredible explosion of light, Han Suyang thought to herself. The fourth wall was right, the ways of survival was indeed now over. With his own hands, he brought it to its conclusion. However, that didn't mean Kim Dokja's story had come to an end there, either. Kugugugugu. Eventually, the storm died down, revealing the messed-up hands of the companions. Hands, laid on top of each other as if they had fused into one. And these hands had destroyed the completed full stop. The crack ran down on the circle's edge like a tear. It now resembled a comma dot. The door was open. Chapter 539. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 4. An explosion rang out on the field of snow. Yu Young-hyuk swung the dark heavenly demon sword, and smacked away the hounds chasing after the abyss, before climbing on the roof of the subway train. That explosion just now, it sounded suspicious. Did something happen inside the train? Damn it. There are just too many. The abyssal black flame dragon fighting off the hounds blew his top in anger. There didn't seem to be an end to these black hounds rushing in at them from all sides. The great sage continuously throwing down lightning bolts to scorch the hounds could only mutter on in an exhausted voice. I don't want to admit this, but I'm still ways off from comparing against the people from 999th turn. Yet another explosion noise went off from inside the subway. Yu Young-hyuk reflexively turned his head in that direction. What could those be? From the front car of the train, bits and pieces of what resembled fables began leaking out. It was also right then that some things were spat out of the hole on the train along with the loud kugugugu noise. Uriel freaked out and shouted at him. Yu Young-hyuk. Dodge it. Right next second, hounds being ejected from the train blanketed Yu Young-hyuk like a black cloud. Asterisk. Pasusu. Black bits scattered about. With the comma-shaped hole as the center, the door before their eyes was disappearing. Han Suyang pushed herself off the floor and looked to the front. Letters were strewn about near the cabin door leading to the 3807 train car. I also. With you all. The moment she saw those words that couldn't yet become sentences, Han Suyang realized just what knocked on the door from the other side. They were fables, very small fragments of Kim Dokja. Her eyes chased after the line of fallen fragments. The closer she got to the center of the cabin, the greater the number of fable fragments fallen on the floor. Kim Dokja was there. Kim Dokja's body, now as small as a young child, was floating up in the middle of the cabin. His eyes were closed, and he seemed unconscious. Rays of entrancing light were being emitted by his figure that continued to shed blinding fable fragments. These fragments went through the subway's windows and drifted off to the destination unknown. Ah! Kim Dokja's avatar next to Han Soo-young gasped out. His eyes were trembling as if he was shocked. Then, he began approaching the young Kim Dokja. I'm... The moment he said that, a powerful suction force began pulling him in. Some kind of power was summoning him back. The avatar's body began breaking down bit by bit. Those broken bits were then sucked into the main body. His gaze looking back met Han Soo-young's. She reached out unbeknownst even to herself. Grab him. However, her hand couldn't touch him. The rate of the avatar breaking down and getting sucked in grew faster. The bits of fragments from the avatar brushed past her hand. Some words were caught in Han Soo-young's fingers. I'm sorry. Just what was he sorry about? Kim Dokja's avatar scattering away like an apparition emitted bright light as he got sucked into the main body. However, despite it absorbing all of the avatar's fables, Kim Dokja's body didn't grow back up again. No, the amount of fables flooding out from him increased, instead. Kim Dokja. Han Soo-young instinctively realized it. They needed to stop that. Otherwise, they would lose him forever. Her muscles tightly wound up released like a spring. And so, just as Han Soo-young tried to approach Kim Dokja floating in the air. Kwaya. Youc ant go fu rthr. Accompanied by a loud explosion noise, powerful gusts of wind suddenly blew in and something exploded out from Kim Dokja's body. His fables were overflowing wildly. Sentences flooding out like black tides blanketed the entirety of the cabin and swallowed Han Soo-young up. Everyone, be careful. She was forced back mercilessly along with sensations of her skin being swept away. Kim Dokja was getting further away. She urgently looked around, but there was not a thing she could grab onto. Even though she unleashed the status of a constellation and borrowed the powers of great fables, she had no method to defend against this surging torrent. Kim Dokja. STO. Sentences escaping from Kim Dokja's body scratched past her entire figure. Sentences a man used to endure his life, the despair created by one person's life. The tidal waves of letters completely blanketing every direction resembled the darkest of the darkest night. The Kim Dokja she understood was merely just the tip of an iceberg. Han Soo-young was overwhelmed in an instant and was helplessly shoved back, unable to say anything. It was Yu Sang-a who supported her back, though. Get yourself together. Kim Dokja's figure could be spied among the gaps of the letters. Lee Ji-hai shouted out. He's a kid? Why did a juicy become like that? Hyung. Everyone, gather around. To fight against the tidal wave, the companions hurtled together. Unfortunately, even that was not enough. They were kept pushed back again and again. At this rate, not only would they be forced outside the cabin, but get ejected from the train itself sooner rather than later. It was then, someone spread open his entire figure and stood to block the exit. Huay up. I shall support you all. It was Lee Hyun-sung. Accompanied by quadududek noise, he activated the steel transformation. His arms and legs assimilated with the metal of the exit and caught the companions like a net. With a pained face, Lee Hyun-sung watched Kim Dokja's fable brushing past his body. To Lee Hyun-sung, Kim Dokja was too difficult. The act of understanding someone started off with admitting that you didn't know anything about that person. Lee Hyun-sung bit down on his lip hard enough to draw blood and shouted out. I can only hold on for a little while. Hurry! Gong Pildu quickly summoned his armed fortress and supported Lee Hyun-sung. From behind. He then shouted out. If I help, we can endure for a bit longer. So, hurry up and rescue that fool. The companions looked at each other. Hold each other's hands, everyone. Zhang Huiwen grabbed onto Yi Hyansong with one hand, and extended the other. Unleash your fables all at once. That outstretched hand was held by Yi Seolhua, then Xing Yusung and Yi Giliang held on to her other hand. The hands of two children were then connected to Yi Jihai. Persephone, as well as Yi Sujiang, followed them right after. Kim Dokja. Wake up. Zhang Haiyang grabbed Yi Sujiang's hand and cried out, while Yu Seng'a caught her extended hand next. Suyang SSI. The last person to grab the outstretched hand was Han Suyang. I got you. Great fable, one who rebels against fate, is continuing on with its storytelling. The great fable that connected the companions as one began resisting against the vicious storm. Like a buoy in the stormy sea, Han Suyang's body helplessly rocked from side to side. She could hold on only because of her companions behind her. The companions tightly held each other's hands within the crashing waves of the letters, as if they were trying to save a drowning man. Zhang Huiwen shouted towards Kim Dokja, ever so faintly visible to her. Dokja SSI. We're here. Just hold on for a little bit longer. The companions holding on to each other's hands were like sturdy sentences connected as one. Han Suyang felt the warmth transmitted in her hand and gradually realized something. Words existed to describe the depths of the darkness. And to console such darkness, the thing called story was created. Kim Dokja. The tightly held hands, supported by the sentences shoring up other sentences. While entrusting herself to that hand, Han Suyang approached Kim Dokja one step at a time. Only his face could barely be seen as the rest was covered by the darkness of the letters. WH at YOU are do ing is me aning ls. The waves grew more and more vicious as, the fourth wall, S voice resounded out. THR is ONE Kim Dokja. Han Suyang knew the reason why that Kim Dokja was getting smaller. The younger face of him right now resembled the most ancient dream they saw some time ago. He'd lose the memories of the days he spent with his companions, and he'd even lose the memories of when he read The Ways of Survival. Then, he'd become the purest child after returning to the universe's great cycle. Later on, he'd get rescued by the secretive plotter. If that was the case, what would happen to the Kim Dokja they remembered? We've managed to come this far, so this. Han Suyang reached out as pain of her hand burning away assaulted her. Kim Dokja was right before her eyes. The one and only reader who could understand this story. That Kim Dokja was right over there. There were less than 4 meters between them, yet to Han Suyang, this distance came across as an infinite margin that nothing could fill. As if an invisible wall was standing before her and Kim Dokja. You son of a bitch. You promised to read my novel, didn't you? She wanted to tell him. Tell him that there was a world that didn't need his sacrifice to be saved. She thought that, if it was her, she should be able to do it. Because she was most proficient at lying than anyone alive, after all. What the hell is this Ways of Survival, anyway? I can easily create dozens, hundreds of worlds of illusions. Her shouting voice was gradually losing its strength. She had written so many sentences until now, yet she was still unable to save a single person. Within the world growing dizzier, Kim Dokja's figure was getting blurrier. What would it have been like if only she was just a little bit stronger? Maybe they didn't plan this out properly. Maybe she should have learned an even stronger attribute. Maybe she should have earned a much, much harsher fable. She shouldn't have abandoned Kim Dokja from the get-go. She should have cotoned onto Kim Dokja's plan sooner. No, maybe. She shouldn't have written The Ways of Survival in the first place. She shouldn't have become an author of such a story. An author? Han Suyang abruptly raised her head. Could she do it? It was uncertain. No, I can do it. Someone else was saying that in her stead. Memories of the 1863rd turn became a fable and began to violently writhe around. Han Suyang looked down at her own fingertips. Her fingers, scorched black like charcoal. She was not a protagonist, but a writer. Han Suyang's hand, looking as if gripping a pen, began to slowly move. They created trajectories in the air. These trajectories went to become letters, and those letters soon became words. Your attribute is being pushed to its absolute limit. Warning. You do not have the authority of overwrite. Han Suyang vomited out a mouthful of blood, but didn't stop. From the very onset, an author really had only one way to reach her reader. Han Suyang imagined. Just like how the other her did once upon a time. With the most vigorous, carefully worded sentences, she began drawing out a man's hands, his arms, and his legs. An individual created solely for the sake of one reader. An entity tougher in body and nobler in heart than any creature in this world. The man who managed to bring down all the stars in the skies to end his truly lengthy regression turns, and eventually, even succeeding in destroying the system of the world. Suchuchuchuchuku. Every character was, as a matter of fact, an incarnation of the author. However, that didn't mean the incarnation was the author itself. The characters that left her hands wouldn't listen to her, after all. And that was why Han Suyang was trying to get the help from the individual she had created. Constellation, architect of the false last act, is unleashing all of her fables. Your new stigma is blooming. That one term that could fill up that empty margin. Han Suyang shouted out as if she was screaming. Yu Yunghyak. And right next second, the letters before her eyes split apart. The breaking the sky swordsmanship. Secret technique, inner mystery transmission. Split the dark ocean. A single sword split apart the pitch-black night ocean. The fighting spirit of a transcender bursting out from the entirety of his body illuminated the darkness of the letters. Stigma, character summon, is activating. The individual she had written, but she didn't know of. Character, Yu Yunghyak, is answering the call. Hold on tight. A man descended with the rays of light. Yu Yunghyak's powerful hand grabbed hers. Han Suyang endured against her eyes tearing up and shouted back at him. You hold on tight, instead. For me Hyansong to Yu Yunghyak, the companion's fable began to glow brightly. To get this far, they had lost many things. Yunghyak SSI. We leave it in your hands. Master. Hurry. However, it wasn't as if they had been losing things only. Yu Yunghyak extended his hand out. The distance of just one person. The distance that couldn't have been bridged without the presence of just one person was finally being closed in. Yu Yunghyak's hand reached out while breaking past the letters. The sentences protecting Kim Dokja fell away one by one. The hand that experienced thousands of regressions tightly grabbed hold on to Kim Dokja's collars, as if to yank out the oldest memories from within. It's time to go back, Kim Dokja. Right next second, as if the lights were turned off, the whole world was suddenly plunged in darkness.